another note while we're looking at this model ready to go. I mentioned that with foam you can be a little bit more aggressive about your cutting, and it's true. Not true in all materials, so don't take it as an assumption. But every file that's going to take some time deserves a closer look to make sure that there's nothing that you can't economize to make it go faster. So a rough way to estimate how long your file is going to take on the CNC is to right-click on your operation and go to Information. So this says it's going to take about 15 minutes to cut this. Do not trust this. The machine itself has settings that it's going to extend this time. I would say it's roughly 150% of this time is the actual truth, closer to 25 minutes. But since this is foam, we can be a little bit more generous with the parameters. So I'm going to turn the step over from 50 up to 90. You never want to go to 100 because you're actually going to leave little thin walls of material behind. And with the cut levels, what happens if I turn it to 100? So since we're using a 1/4 inch bit, that means it's going almost a 1/4 inch stepping over and a full 1/4 inch stepping down. Through foam, this is nothing. Through harder materials, even plywood, which is still quite soft, that's going to be very aggressive, and you're never going to want to go that high. But if I click Generate, you can see that the lines become much more sparse, but it's still doing the same roughing. And if I click Information, it's now gone from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. So we cut the time in a third and that will extrapolate by increasing the step overs and step downs. You can use that advantage if you have a set amount of time to get a little bit more detail out of your parallel finish if you want it. So you can see then when we go down to 5% of step over of a 1/4 inch bit, it starts to get really dense. Now, finally, how do you know what this is going to look like? Well, if you can visualize it, great. If you can't visualize it, like me, you can actually simulate it. So there's a Simulate tab in your RhinoCam browser next to the program that has your operations. So in Simulate, you're going to want to tell it what your stock was to start with. You can just go to Box Stock, and it'll grab your stock, and then click on your operation and hit play. This is a good chance to see these little toggles down here that can turn off the visibility of the toolpaths or the stock or different things. So I'm going to turn off the toolpath visibility to just get a look at this. And this is pretty accurate. I mean, it's a kind of a choppy representation, but you can see the sort of step nature of the horizontal roughing. And then if I click on Parallel Finishing and click Play, it'll use the stock as already roughed and run a simulation of the parallel finish pass on top of it. So this is a very tight parallel finish pass at 5%. I mean, I've used down to 1% in certain situations. That didn't make a lot of sense. But through the simulation, you can see pretty much what you're going to get. Sort of a lo-fi version of it, but you can see that the shape is there. You can see that the tabs are there. And this little rounding of the tabs is accurate. That is what it's going to look like when it comes out. But your shape is entirely there. Jump cut. One final very important note. 50% of failures on the CNC machine are caused by a collision between the collet, which is the thing that holds the bit to the machine, and your material. That means that you've gone too deep for the amount that your bit is sticking out of the machine. This simulation isn't giving us a perfectly accurate version of that because we haven't really modeled in the tool the shape of the bit very accurately. The quick way to be sure of this problem is just to make sure that your bit is always substantially longer than you need in the depth of the cut. So if we're cutting through a 3-inch piece of material, you better be using at least a 4-inch bit to cut it. If you're cutting through a 4 or 5-inch material, you're going to need at least a 6-inch bit to cut it. If you are coming close, and you know you're coming close, there are ways for us to look at getting around those depth restrictions and to making sure that you don't deal with any collisions. In the case of foam, it's gross and it collides with the foam and melts it, it might not destroy your model. In the case of any other material, it can be very, very bad, trust me. So if you think that you're going deep and you're sort of walking on the edge there, just talk to me and talk to the shop crew, and we can troubleshoot a way to do it. Okay, that's it. Post your 3D CNC files, take a couple screenshots, and then come talk to us, and you're done.